Hello, my name is Rabbi Daniel Rosler, and I'm the Rav of Kihilat Alei Zion in Hendon, and I'm very delighted to have the opportunity today to share Torah with you for the Lunch and Learn program and to speak about certain aspects of Purim. And what I want to discuss today is a halachic aspect of Purim, and that is the custom or the mitzvah of getting drunk on Purim. And I want to ask the question, is it really a mitzvah to get drunk on Purim? We're all very much aware of people who do get drunk on Purim in the name of religious fidelity and devotion. And unfortunately, we're also only too aware of some of the dangers of the excesses of Purim, not to mention in a regular year, but certainly this year as well. And really what I want to do is try and establish, is there really a mitzvah to get drunk on Purim? And what does the halacha really demand of us in terms of Simchat Purim, rejoicing on Purim? So I want to start with the Gemara in Masechet Megillah, Daf Zayin Amud Bet, which says as follows: Amar Rava, the Talmudic sage Rava said, Mechayev inish livasume befuria ad dulo yada bein aro Haman lebaruch Mordechai. A person is obligated to become drunk or intoxicated on Purim until they don't know the difference between Aror Haman, Haman is accursed, and Baruch Mordechai, Mordechai is blessed. Now I've translated this word livasume as to get drunk or intoxicated. Actually, in the Sonsino translation of the Talmud, it says to become mellow on Purim. Mellow, of course, is a little bit different to becoming drunk or intoxicated. Mellow implies a warm, fuzzy feeling, whereas drunk implies really being unaware of your surroundings. And that's one of the things I want to try and tease out from the sugya today, is what is really we supposed to be doing, what is the halacha asking of us. So the Talmud now tells us of an instance that happened, an event that happened, trying to fulfill this requirement of Mechayev inish livasume befuraya, that a person should become drunk on Purim. And the Gemara tells us that Rabba v'Rabbi Zera avdu sudat Purim bahadei hadadi, that one year the two sages, Rabba and Rabbi Zera, had Purim Suda together. They wanted to have Purim Suda with friends, with like-minded people, so they chose to have Purim Suda together. Ivsum, and they became drunk, they became intoxicated, as the Gemara has indicated to us that one should. Kam Rabba shechate l'Rabbi Zera, but this had somewhat extreme consequences, and Rabba got up, shechate l'Rabbi Zera, and he slaughtered Rabbi Zera. He killed him in a drunken stupor. He killed his friend at the Purim Suda. L'machar, the next day, he sobered up and he really realized what he'd done. This was terrible. He'd killed Rabbi Zera. What was he going to do about it? By rachamei v'achaye. So the Gemara tells us that he davened for mercy and he was revived. Rabbi Zera recovered. Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Zera got better. L'shana, the following year, Amar le, he said to him, Neite mav nave sudat Purim bahadei hadadi. Rabbi came to Rabbi Zera and said, you know what, last year we had this wonderful Purim Suda together. It was really, really enjoyable. I don't remember so much about it, but I have this recollection somewhere that it was just a great occasion. Let's do Purim Suda again together this year. Amar le, Rabbi Zera wasn't so keen on the idea, and he said to him, Lo b'chol shata v'shata mitrachesh nisa. In actual fact, a miracle doesn't happen every year, and I can't rely on being as lucky this year as I was last year. Last year I got away with it. I'm not sure that I'd get away with it this year. This year I want to have Purim Suda in the security of my own home, my own family. I'm not having Purim Suda with you again. And that's the end of the sugya in Masechet Megillah. So what we see from this sugya is indeed there is such a chiyuv, there is an obligation to get drunk on Purim to the extent that one no longer knows the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. We saw an event where Rabba and Rabbi Zera had Purim Suda together and they fulfilled this requirement, and Rabbah killed Rabbi Zera as a result. And then we find that the following year, when Rabbi Zera had been miraculously revived, he didn't want to have Purim Suda again with Rabbah because he was frightened of what happened the previous year happening again this year. So what I want to do now is look at some of the commentators on this passage to try and establish how we should really understand it, and should it be pshuto k'mashma, or is it as straightforward as it seems to suggest, that really, yes, we're just supposed to get drunk on Purim till we no longer know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So I want to start with comments of the Mairi. The Mairi is a 13th century Spanish commentator on the Talmud. He called his commentary the Beit HaBechira, and it's on most of the Masechtot of Shas. And the Mairi is a very logical, common sense Rishon, and we're going to see that he applies that approach to this sugya as well. The Mairi says, Lebinyan biozeh sha'amar shechate l'Rabbi Zera. As far as explaining this notion that Rabbi Zera was killed, doesn't actually mean that Rabbi Zera was killed. Chas v'shalom, to suggest that the Amora Rabbah would kill Rabbi Zera, and that there was a miracle that we had a resurrection here. Rather, shechate means perush milashon sachita. Shechate and sachate, the shin and the sin are sort of interchangeable, and shechate really means sachate. So what does it mean, sachate? Schita, lischot, means to squeeze something. Ritzon olamar, she'im achuv she'im acho. It means that Rabbah just gave Rabbi Zera this enormous bear hug. He squeezed him really tight, so he almost squeezed the life out of him. It doesn't mean that he actually killed him, but he squeezed him, that he maybe cracked a few ribs or, made him faint or something like that. He did some damage to him, but he didn't actually kill him. Sachate Ritzolama Sheima'acho Va'achaye, and what does it mean that he revived him? Humilashon Hachalimeni V'Hachieni. It means that he made him recover. He was ill and he was made to recover. So the Mairi is telling us that this story isn't actually quite as radical and terrible as it seems. Rabbah didn't actually kill Rabbi Zera, but he hugged him very, very thoroughly and almost squeezed the life out of him, as it were, hurt him, and the next day prayed for him to recover. But the Mairi doesn't address for us the question of, does one really have to become drunk on Purim? And the Baal HaMaor, one of the commentaries on the Talmud, the Baal HaMaor was Rabbeinu Zerachia Halevi, a 12th century Provençal rabbi. He says as follows: Amar Rabba Chai v'nish levesume b'furaya. Person should become drunk on Purim. Katav HaRabbeinu Ephraim. So he's now quoting from Rabbeinu Ephraim, an early authority. Me'ahuv dedekam Rabba shechate l'Rabbi Zera. From the case that the Gemara talks about, where Rabbah got up and killed Rabbi Zera, and L'shana Amale Tana Aved, and the following year he said, let's have Purim Suda together again, and Rabbi Zera said, no way. So we see that Rabbah's statement that a person should become drunk on Purim has been dismissed. It's been put to one side. The late Hilchata Kavate, and the halacha is not in accordance with Rabbah. One doesn't become drunk on Purim. The lav shapid damil avit hachi, and in actual fact, it's not correct to do this. It's not correct to get drunk on Purim, because the reason why the Gemara is bringing this episode isn't to show us, that you're supposed to get drunk on Purim. Rather, it's coming to show us the contrary. It's coming to show us that you shouldn't get drunk on Purim because of this disastrous episode that once happened, and that we should see that it's been rejected from the halakhic corpus. So that is the view of Rabbeinu Ephraim, quoted by the Baal HaMaor. However, if we look in the Torah, one of the primary and earliest codifications of the halacha, the Torah in Orach Chaim, Siman, Taf Reish Tzadik Hey, says as follows: Mitzvah laharbot b'sudat Purim. So it's a mitzvah to have plenty to eat at the Purim Suda. V'tzarich she'yishtaker, and a person needs to become intoxicated or drunk, mellow, as the Sonsino would say. Ad shelo yeda ben Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai, until they don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So we see that the halacha is paskening, is ruling for us that one should become drunk on Purim. Now, I think for many people, and certainly for many people who have a religious sensitivity, there's something deeply uncomfortable about the notion of needing to become drunk on Purim to the degree that one no longer knows the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. It should be something that sits uncomfortably with us. In English, we have an expression, drunk as a lord, but in Hebrew, we talk about shichruto shel Lot, the degree of drunkenness that Lot reached when Lot committed incest with his daughters. That's an example of shichrut in Tanakh. We have Noach after he came out of the Teva, after he exited the ark, he planted a vineyard, and then he became drunk, and as a result of it, terrible things happened to Noach. Our examples of drunkenness in Tanakh are all very negative. How can it be that there should be a mitzvah that we would get drunk on Purim? So let's look at the comments of the Eliyahu Rabbah. The Eliyahu Rabbah is a 18th century commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. The author lived in Prague, and he writes as follows: Ve'im tomar, if you were to say, He'achi chayvu chazal mashin nizkar b'torah v'anviim b'kama kamot ha'shichrut michshol gadol. How could the sages have made a demand of us that we become drunk on Purim, when this is something that we see throughout Tanakh as being something very negative and something which can cause lots of mistakes? V'yesh lomar, so the answer is that Purim is a special case. Why? Mipnei shekol hanisim shena'aseh Yisrael b'mei Achashverosh hayu al yedei mishteh. All the miracles that happened to the Jewish people through Achashverosh, in the time of Achashverosh, a key event was the mishteh, was the banquets with wine that were being celebrated. So think back to scene 1. Scene 1 is where Vashti where Achashverosh was having a drunken party, and he wanted Vashti to come in and dance for him, and she refused. And that's as a result of that, Esther was appointed. So if King Achashverosh hadn't been drunk, then he would never have asked Vashti to come and dance. And Vashti wouldn't have said no, she wouldn't have got deposed, and Esther wouldn't have been appointed as queen. And Haman and his downfall was all to do with these banquets that Esther prepared for Haman and the king. So that the miracle is remembered through shtiyat hayayin, by drinking wine. So what we're seeing is that even though in general drunkenness is something which is very negative, here it's got something which is particularly relevant to Purim, in the sense that the miracles of Purim were dependent in some way on mishteh hayayin, on drunken feasts, and therefore we want to pay tribute to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for enabling that to happen in the days of Mordechai and Esther, and therefore we apply it also in our days. So it's sort of a reenactment. It's worth pointing out that the Eliyahu Rabbah makes the observation that the mishteh, the banquets in the times of Mordechai and Esther, were mishteh hayayin. They were banquets with wine. In actual fact, this is a point discussed by some of the poskim, is when one gets drunk or merry or intoxicated or mellow on Purim, is one allowed to do that through the medium of any alcoholic beverage, or does it davka have to be wine? And it might well be that it actually has to be wine, because that's how the miracle occurred. Then he makes a very interesting observation at the end. He quotes from the Maharil. The Maharil, very important late Rishon. It says as follows, Tzarech lishtaker lemitzvah v'lo la'akev. So he's already qualifying things. He says this notion of having to get drunk on Purim, it's the mitzvah, it's a meritorious practice, it's a good thing to do, but it's lo la'akev, it's not critical. If a person doesn't do that, then that's also fine. If a person doesn't want to get drunk on Purim for whatever reason, that's also fine. It's not like you have to bench lulav on Sukkot, you have to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, you have to listen to the Megillah on Purim. Those are absolute obligations. This isn't an absolute obligation. This is a mitzvah. It's good practice, but it's not essential. In any event, what the Eliyahu Rabbah does seem to be doing is essentially endorsing the ruling of the Torah that one does need to become drunk on Purim. However, if we look at the Rambam in Hilchot Megillah, Perek Bet Halacha Tet Vav, we'll find that the Rambam qualifies this quite significantly. And the Rambam says as follows, Keitzad chovat su'udazu. So how does one fulfill the mitzvah of the Sudat Purim, of the meal that one has to have on Purim? On Purim, we've got 4 primary mitzvot, one of which is Sudat Purim, a mishteh of eating a feast on Purim. So what do you have to do? So the Rambam says, Sheyochal basar, you should eat meat. And this is a point of discussion amongst the poskim. Do you absolutely have to eat meat on Purim Suda or not? V'takein Suda na'a k'fi hashetim sayado. You should have a nice meal according to what you're able to afford. Meaning that, technically speaking, you could possibly fulfill the obligation just by sitting down to a peanut butter sandwich or something like that. But that's not really what you're supposed to be doing. What's the obligation of this Suda? You should have a Suda na'a, a nice meal, k'fi hashetim sayado, according to your abilities. V'shoteh yayin, and then you drink wine, ad sheyishtaker, till you get drunk, v'yiradim b'shichrut, and you fall asleep as a result of your drunkenness. So this is very, very significant. It's significant for a couple of reasons. Number one, and it's easy to overlook this, but the Rambam is clearly placing the mitzvah of chayav ha'inish livasume, he's clearly placing this in the context of the Sudat Purim, in the context of the mitzvah of eating a meal on Purim. To get drunk at the night of Purim, which is what happens for better or for worse in many of the yeshivot, is not a fulfillment of this chiyuv of chayav ha'inish livasume b'furia. It's an obligation as part of the Suda, and the mitzvah of Suda only applies during the day on Purim. So the mitzvah of getting drunk, if there is such a mitzvah, is in the context of the Sudat Purim. Then the Rambam says, how does one fulfill this obligation to get drunk? The shoteh yain, you drink wine, ad sheyishtaker, v'yiradim b'shichrut, and you fall asleep as a result of your drunkenness. So it's not saying that you have to get drunk in an excessive sense. It's saying that you just need to drink enough that you'll fall asleep. You might say, but that's not what the Gemara told us. The Gemara right at the very beginning said, chayav ha'inish livasume b'furaya ad lo yada bein aro haman lebaruch mordechai, that a person has to become drunk on Purim to the degree they don't know the difference between Haman being a curse and Mordechai being blessed. The Rambam does deal with that, because you fall asleep as a result of being drunk. You fall asleep as a result of that. You don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai any longer. You can't tell the difference between what is blessed and what is accursed. So that's the way that the Rambam deals with it. So now we seem to have 2 opinions. We've got the opinion of the Torah that quite simply states that one should become drunk on Purim, and the Rambam who very much qualifies it, together of course with the view of Rabbeinu Ephraim, who says that Bichlal the rule doesn't apply. So what does the Shulchan Aruch tell us? The Shulchan Aruch tells us, chayav ha'inish livasume b'furaya ad lo yada bein aro haman lebaruch Mordechai. Person should become drunk on Purim until they don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. It seems that the Shulchan Aruch is ruling straightforwardly that one should become drunk to that degree on Purim. However, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, in his glosses on Shulchan Aruch says as follows: V'yesh omrim, there are those who say, De'ein tzarich lishtaker kol kach. You don't need to drink so much. Ela sheyishte yoter milimudo, but you should drink a bit more than you usually do. V'yishan, and then you'll fall asleep. And as a result of falling asleep, then you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So we see that certainly the Ramah is incorporating what the Rambam has said. It's a slightly different text. He's not quoting verbatim because he says, drink a bit more than you usually do. It says that you should fall asleep as a result, and that way you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So we've now got the two opinions. The Shulchan Aruch, which seems to be saying that yes, you have to become normatively drunk, and the Ramah, which is saying that in actual fact there are those who say you don't need to become drunk to that degree, and only to the degree that you'll fall asleep because your eyelids are heavy and you keep sort of dropping off at the table like that, and it's not the normal way that you sit at a Suda and you just sort of slump over a little and snore a bit. That is fulfilling the mitzvah of Ad Delo Yada. Then the Ramah says something massively important. Whether you're a person who drinks a lot or a person who only drinks a little bit, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Provided your motivation is correct, provided that your motivation is to serve the Almighty in this way. If you're getting drunk just because you're looking for an excuse to drown your sorrows or to just become legless once a year, then you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. That's not what the Torah is asking of us, or the halacha is asking of us. It's asking us to get drunk so that we don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. It's part of a religious fulfillment, religious obligation. On the other hand, if getting drunk is something which sits uncomfortably with you, if it's something which you feel is not a way that you can serve the Almighty with, then that's also fine. Echad hamamit. You don't need to get drunk. So long as your motivation is correct. So it can't be that just you're the type of person who doesn't like Purim, prefers to sit there looking miserable and glum while everybody else is having fun, and that's why you're not drinking. That's not the right thing. But if it is that you feel that you can't have the dveikut with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't cleave to the Almighty spiritually and intellectually and emotionally when you're drunk, and that's what you want to achieve on Purim, so therefore it would be best that you're not drinking, and if your motivation is for the sake of heaven, then that's good, whichever way you do it. But are there any other possibilities? And the answer is yes. So I want to share with you three or four other explanations that appear in the Acharonim, in the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch and on the Gemara, which address what might it mean that a person has to become drunk on Purim. So the Taz, one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, written in Poland in the 17th century, says as follows: I think the way to understand it is as follows. We have to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thanks to the Almighty, for a double kindness that He has done to the Jewish people. One is something which was bad. The Puranut, the catastrophe that He brought on Haman and his family. And even if Mordechai hadn't been promoted and blessed, and he'd been saved with everybody else, Dayenu, that would have been plenty. But at the same time that Haman suffered his downfall, Mordechai enjoyed a meteoric rise. And that's why the halacha says that one needs to become drunk. Until you get to the stage where you don't know which is the greater chesed, which is the greater kindness of the Almighty. Is it the downfall of Haman? Or is it the promotion of Mordechai? You can argue it either way. Yes, if Haman hadn't been toppled, then the Jews would have been annihilated. But you could say, no, if Mordechai hadn't been promoted, then we'd have still been left as an undesirable people in Shushan, and ultimately the Beit HaMikdash wouldn't have been rebuilt, etc., etc., etc. You can work it both ways, and when you get to the stage where you're totally lost in the argument, then you've reached that stage of Ad lo yada bein Aro Haman lebaruch Mordechai. So that's the Taz's understanding, that again, it's not about becoming paralytically drunk or leglessly drunk, but it's about reaching a stage of intellectual confusion and befuddlement about something which is indeed confusing and befuddling. So that's the explanation of the Taz. The Eliyahu Rabbah, an 18th century commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, has two very interesting observations to make about this requirement to become drunk. And again, like the Taz, he's suggesting that it doesn't really mean that one has to become totally drunk. The Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai shavin b'gematria. Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai, if you look at the words carefully and you work out the numerical value of each letter, you'll find that the two expressions have exactly the same gematria. They have exactly the same numerical value. V'shikur bakal toeh b'cheshbon. And even if you're only slightly drunk, a little bit intoxicated, you've just had just one glass of wine, big glass probably, but one glass of wine, then also you won't be able to do the calculations. And that's what it's saying. Not that you have to become properly drunk, but just a bit that you can't do the mental arithmetic in your head. So presumably today people are still all dry and sober, so you can do the mental arithmetic, but it's 502 in both cases. So that's the Eliyahu Rabbah's first suggestion. And his second suggestion is, V'yesh omrim, there are those who say, Shepiut haya, there was a certain liturgical poem they had, like the Zemirot that we have on Shabbat. So there was Zemirot for the Purim Suda, and there was a certain poem that they used at the Purim Suda, Shal habayit echad onin Aro Haman, Val habayit echad Baruch Mordechai. At the end of one stanza you say Baruch Haman. No, I got it wrong and I haven't even been drinking. The end of one stanza you say Aro Haman, accursed is Haman. And at the end of the next line you say Baruch Mordechai, blessed is Mordechai. You need to be sort of quite clear-headed so that you don't make any mistakes in this. It can... Sometimes, the tune goes very fast and the words are quick, and you've got the leader sings it and everybody jumps in, Aro Haman, Baruch Mordechai, and it moves and jumps back and forth, and you've got to be on the ball to make sure that you got it right. And if you're not on the ball, then you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So it's very significant, I think, that the Taz and the Eliyahu Rabbah are both trying to say that it probably doesn't really mean that you properly have to get drunk on Purim till you're really full of alcohol, because that's not something which the Torah really wants of us. And they're trying to temper this somewhat and give a creative explanation of what it might mean. Let's look at the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet is the commentary on Shas of the third Gera Rebbe. And he says as follows: Nirena Faresh, it would seem that we should explain it. Doesn't mean to say you've got to drink yourself to the stage where you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. But the point is that the whole day long you have to be enjoying drinking on Purim. So this is perhaps different to what the Rambam said. The Rambam put it in the context of the Sudat Purim, whereas the Sfat Emet is saying, no, this is something which applies throughout the day. And until you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai, you still got such a chiyuv. You still have to say yes to another glass of wine. To exclude if one gets to that stage. Even before you get, well, certainly once you're drunk, you don't have to drink anything more. But even, he says, before you're drunk, you don't have to drink anything more. It's just, you don't have to drink enough that you will become drunk. You just have to be drinking on Purim. But if you want to spend the day, gently, slowly nursing a mug of wine, mulled wine, or whatever it is you want to drink, or drinking Bartonura Moscato d'Asti, slowly over the course of the day, then one's also fulfilled the obligation. But let me finish off with what I think is the most important source that I've got to share with you, and that's from the Kolbo. The Kolbo is a halachic compendium composed probably in France in the 14th century. And he addresses the question as follows. Person should become drunk on Purim. Lo sheyishtaker. It doesn't mean that you should become drunk. It can't mean that you should become drunk. Shashikrut isu gamor. Getting drunk is totally prohibited. There's no greater avera, no greater sin than becoming drunk. It can cause a person behaving improperly from a sexual perspective. It can cause a person to shed blood. We saw in the Gemara in Masechet Megillah right at the beginning of the year how Rabbah killed Rabbi Zera, but in a contemporary context, the number of deaths on the roads because of drunk driving, is a very serious matter. Ulakama averot zulatan, and all sorts of other things. Getting drunk is not something that we ought to be doing. So what does it mean then? You should get drunk until you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. You should drink a little bit more than you usually drink, so that you're happy, and happier than usual, and you're able to make the poor and destitute people happy, and you'll comfort them, and as a result you'll speak to their hearts, you'll connect with them, and that is what real simcha is. So what does that mean about Adulo Yada ben Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai? That you shouldn't know the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Okay, it's very nice what the Kolbo said. That doesn't really mean you should get drunk, and it just means you should be in a nice, friendly mood. But how does that fit in with what the Gemara said, that you've got to, and the Shulchan Aruch, that you've got to get drunk to the stage where you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai? So I think the answer might be as follows. Think about it. A wealthy person is sitting at their Purim Suda. It's all going to be very different this year. Everybody's got to stay in their own bubbles. You can't have Purim Suda with other people. But in a classical year, normal year, wealthy person sitting at his Purim Suda, people are coming in, collecting, spieling, knocking on the doors, those sorts of things. People are coming up, collecting for institutions, collecting for themselves. Under normal circumstances, you might want to assess the person on their merits. Well, the person, I understand he's poor, but is he a nice person? Is he a good person? Is he a frum person? Is he a truthful person? Etc., etc. You'll make all those calculations in your mind, and you'll decide whether or not you want to support this person. On Purim, you should drink enough that you don't know the difference between Aro Haman and Baruch Mordechai. On Purim, you should drink enough so that you don't. Those distinctions aren't relevant any longer. A good person, a bad person. This is a Jew who's come to me for help. This is a Jew who wants support. This is a Jew who needs tzedakah. That's what you should drink to. You should drink to the stage that you don't look at the person with a critical eye and say, does he deserve it? Doesn't he deserve it? Should I give to him? Shouldn't I give to him? Just be nice to people. Put yourself in a good mood. Make yourself relaxed. And maybe, according to this, in actual fact, the way the Sonsino translated it right at the beginning, a person should become mellow, is what's really wanted of us. We should become mellow. We should become relaxed and happy about everything. So what we've seen is a range of shitos, range of different views how to understand matters. I have to say that it's always seemed to me very unlikely that the Gedolei Yisrael of previous generations really ever got drunk to the stage where they're staggering around. I don't believe that the Chafetz Chaim did that. I don't believe the Chazon Ish did that. I don't believe Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach did that. I know that Mori Rabbi Harav Lichtenstein and Mori Rabbi Harav Amital Zichronam Livracha didn't do that. We're supposed to be a Kiddush Hashem. If we know that we can drink plenty and still be in control of ourselves, then Tavo Alecha Bracha. That's good meritorious practice. But if we're at all worried that we might create any sort of Chilul Hashem, whether it's within our families, within our communities, within the neighborhood or anything like that, then certainly one should abstain. It's sometimes it's a mitzvah to indulge, and sometimes it's a mitzvah to abstain. And it's one of these things that, we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, Echad HaMarbe v'Echad HaMamit, whether you drink a lot or you just drink a little, so long as the person focuses their hearts on heavens. I think that this year we have to be particularly careful. First of all, of course, with a lot of illness around, drunkenness cannot necessarily be so healthy and safe. But also, the country is still in a point of crisis. Many people have suffered a lot over the course of the past year, illness, bereavement, financially, mental health ways, etc. And whilst on the one hand, Purim is a great opportunity just to cast that all to one side for a day and to be happy about life, we need to be sensitive to feelings of people around us, both co-religionists and our Gentile neighbours as well, and make sure that we behave in an appropriate, proper way that will be ultimately a Kiddush Hashem. But I hope at the same time everybody will be able to have a Purim Sameach, an enjoyable, uplifting Purim. Thank you very much for joining me to learn Torah today.